If I were in command that night, I'd definitely lean towards taking the response further beyond just neutralizing the missile launcher. Here's why. 1. Escalation and deterrence. When the Houthis fired on a U.S. fighter jet, they crossed a line, not just in terms of military engagement, but in the broader geopolitical context. Firing at a U.S. fighter means you're signaling to the world that you're willing to challenge one of the most powerful military forces in the world. In such a situation, you can't afford to send the wrong message, that it's okay to engage U.S. forces without facing consequences. The rules of engagement had already shifted, and the stakes were too high to allow them to escape with just the destruction of a single missile launcher. The Houthis had taken a calculated risk, believing that they could strike at a U.S. asset, likely thinking it was just a drone or a low-value target. But this was an F-16, a high-value target, with advanced intelligence capabilities, part of a broader ISR network designed specifically to track and neutralize threats. They fired their missile, but the bigger gamble was not just the missile. It was the assumption that they'd face minimal consequences if it missed. By launching a counterstrike that wiped out their radar network and command infrastructure, the U.S. could send a crystal-clear message that any escalation would be met with overwhelming force. It wouldn't just be about neutralizing a single missile launcher. It would be a reminder that messing with U.S. assets on a military level will not be tolerated, and there will be severe, far-reaching repercussions. 2. Strategic targeting and surgical strikes. Looking at the larger picture, the U.S. had already gathered enough intelligence. Real-time missile trajectory data, GPS coordinates, and thermal signatures by the time that first missile missed. In modern warfare, data is often the key to success. Once the U.S. knew the exact location of the missile launcher, radar positions, and potential command hubs, it would be strategically irresponsible not to take advantage of that knowledge. The information was already at hand, and striking at those radar sites and command posts would ensure that the Houthis had no operational capabilities to retaliate. Further strikes would be a logical continuation of the initial response. Why? Because a missile strike against a launcher may incapacitate one system, but without neutralizing the entire network, the radar sites, the command centers, and the mobile launchers, the enemy could still regenerate a threat. The key takeaway here is that the U.S. wasn't just retaliating. It was erasing a threat and minimizing the risk of future escalation. By taking out the radar sites and command posts, the U.S. would be systematically dismantling the Houthis' ability to coordinate attacks. This would make any future attacks less effective, less coordinated, and harder to execute. It would ensure the Houthis couldn't just rebuild or relocate their assets without having to deal with ongoing, precise targeting. And, crucially, it would disrupt the broader Iranian-backed network that had been supplying and training the Houthis in the use of these advanced missile systems. 3. Modern warfare as a multi-layered response. The nature of modern warfare is precisely coordinated and multi-layered. From the Tomahawk missiles launched from the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer to the airstrike package from the USS Truman, the U.S. military demonstrated its ability to synchronize different platforms for a single, unified goal: neutralization. Striking the launcher alone would miss an opportunity to fully disrupt the Houthis' capabilities. The entire infrastructure needed to be erased in order to prevent further attacks. In this context, Package Bravo wasn't just a show of force. It was about resetting the power balance. A multi-domain strike involving cruise missiles, airstrikes, and electronic warfare was designed to send a message to the Houthis and anyone else considering similar actions. We can track, target, and destroy your military assets with precision. We are not just responding, we're neutralizing your ability to act. What this does, in a psychological and strategic sense, is shatter the adversary's confidence. The Houthis wouldn't just lose assets, they would lose face. In warfare, perception matters as much as the actual destruction of military assets. The fear and confusion that would have spread through Houthi ranks following the U.S. counterstrikes would make them hesitant to engage in similar actions in the future. They wouldn't just worry about losing military equipment, they'd worry about losing everything. 4. The broader geopolitical implications. Warfare today isn't just about engaging one adversary. It's about sending a message to other actors watching the conflict unfold. The Iranians, watching closely, would understand that escalating a proxy war with the U.S. comes with high stakes. They'd realize that even if they supply and train militant groups like the Houthis, their own assets and interests could be at risk. The U.S. had already demonstrated its capability and willingness to respond with overwhelming force, not just as a reactionary move, but as a preemptive shift in posture. This would give any nation or group contemplating a similar strategy pause. The U.S. has always been a dominant military power, but modern conflicts are more complex than ever, often involving proxies, covert operations, and rapid technological escalation. The U.S. response in this case would demonstrate that it has the ability to reshape the battlefield in real time, not just react to it. This is a form of power projection that reshapes regional dynamics. 5. The risk of inaction. Had the U.S. stopped after neutralizing the missile launcher, it would have missed the opportunity to fully dismantle the Houthi network. There's always a risk that the adversary could regroup, rebuild, and retaliate. By not going further, you leave the door open for future escalation. And in a situation like this, where the Houthis have already shown they're willing to escalate with missile strikes, it's crucial to close that door completely. The Houthis were emboldened by their previous successes, especially after shooting down the MQ-9 Reaper. The U.S. response to that was swift, but had the U.S. shown any sign of hesitation, it might have encouraged further attempts. This wasn't just about neutralizing one threat. It was about taking decisive action that would prevent future ones. 6. Warfare as a show of power and resolve. The core of the message being sent was this: if you engage U.S. forces, you better be prepared for the consequences. Why executing the full multi-layered strike? The U.S. demonstrated a level of operational and tactical dominance that few adversaries could match. This wasn't just a retaliation, it was a strategic reset. It was about ensuring that every potential adversary, whether in Yemen, Iran, or beyond, understood that attacking U.S. military assets would lead to a response that could utterly cripple their capabilities. In a way, this type of strike serves as a deterrent. Future adversaries will think twice before launching similar attacks, knowing that the U.S. military is always watching, always gathering data, and always ready to respond in kind. The Houthis' attempt to hit a U.S. fighter jet might have been a bold move, but became their undoing. Not only did they lose assets, but they lost momentum, confidence, and the upper hand. Final thoughts. If I were in command that night, I would have made the decision to go further. The military response wasn't just about neutralizing a launcher. It was about completely dismantling the Houthis' offensive capabilities, sending a message to other actors, and setting a precedent for how the U.S. military handles aggression. The world is watching, and modern warfare is about more than just winning the battle. It's about defining the rules of engagement, ensuring that your adversaries are deterred from taking further aggressive action, and shaping the future course of conflict. Stopping after neutralizing the launcher would have been a half measure, too cautious and too uncertain. Finishing the job would ensure that the Houthis and anyone else would think long and hard before challenging the might of U.S. military power again.